Hello, good morning, good evening. Welcome to this complimentary webinar about avoiding the P word. P word in this case stands for price. I am going to be talking to you for the next 45 minutes or so. My name is David Nisbet. I'm a value selling partner here in the UK. I'm based there in Birmingham, just in Staffordshire if you know it well. We've got a real international presence today. We've got about 500 delegates have confirmed, and I think we've got about 200, 250 people already dialed into the call from all over the world. So I've already had interest today from Romania. I've had someone confirm the time that it's going to be in Beijing, which is midnight. So if you are joining us from Beijing, Benny, thank you so much, and I hope you stay awake for it. I know we've also got delegates joining us from South Africa and Ghana, as well as all over the USA. So thank you so much for taking the time and giving us an hour today. In terms of housekeeping, as I said, I'm going to talk for about 45 to 50 minutes, and I'd like to leave some time for questions at the end. Any questions that I can't answer, I'll respond via email directly afterwards or in the next day or so. There's a chat box over in the right-hand side of your panel. I'm going to urge you to get involved wherever possible, and I'm going to ask for your feedback and opinion on certain topics. So please do get involved and feedback. We're also going to have an interactive poll. So this is the first time we've done this, but we're going to have a poll and ask your perceptions about a certain topic, and then share that insight in real time on the call. So please do get involved and enjoy the session. The last thing to say is that the session is being recorded. So if for whatever reason you need to pop out, that's no problem. You can find us. This webinar will be available from the resources page on the Value Selling website under webinars. So I'll give you the links for those at the end of the webinar, but let's get involved. Let's get started. So in terms of an agenda, I'm going to give you some really practical tips about when to have that pricing discussion, about differentiation, and how you can really bring out your unique competitive selling points in the market. I'm going to talk to you about price and value and the difference between those two things. We're also going to cover off negotiation, and I think you can spend a lot of time on negotiation, so I'm just going to cover it quite briefly, but give you a bit of an overview of some of the key dimensions and tactics that you can use in a negotiation situation. The scope and the plan for today is to give you some tangible tools and some actions that you can take forwards into your next sales call. So I really hope you find it useful and interesting. Let's get started. Just in the next couple of minutes, while we're waiting for delegates to come and join us on the call, I thought I'd give you a bit of a brain teaser. So if you wouldn't mind, have a go at counting up the squares on this slide. It's not exactly the way it seems when you first look at it, so I'd urge you to think outside the box, as it were. But I'm going to ask you to write your answers in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll see who gets closest. Thank you very much. I can see some answers coming in now, so I can see someone saying it's 16. I can see people saying 19, 17, getting closer. I've got 24, and I've got a couple now coming up with the correct answer. The correct answer for this particular brain teaser is actually 30 squares. So 30 squares in total. I'm going to tell you how I got to 30, because I know it's going to keep you up at night otherwise. So firstly, you start with the smallest boxes. So there's 16 of these, 4 by 4. You've then got boxes if you aggregate 4. So these 4 would be one. These 4 would be another, these 4 would be another, these 4, and these 4 at the bottom. And if you continue to go up like that, you'll get to 25. Then if you add the 4 biggest squares, so the 3, you get an extra 4, which takes you up to 29. And then finally the box all the way around the outside, that gives 30 squares. So it's a bit of a brain teaser, bit of a, it gives us all a chance to use the technology and get involved. But there is a deeper message here, and that's about our perceptions. So the world of sales has changed, and it's important as sales professionals that we adopt and adapt our perceptions and the way that we have conversations in this new landscape. So let me tell you briefly how the world of sales has changed. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's certainly a starting point and the 4 things that we're seeing driving some slightly different behaviors. So firstly, the thing that's making the pricing discussion more difficult is that prospects are better educated. A recent article from McKinsey talked about highly networked super buyers. Now, maybe that's overkill and maybe it's a bit of scaremongering, but essentially, people, our customers, know more about our products than ever before. Moreover, they're sharing information. So they're learning from others that have faced similar challenges, and they're sharing their experiences via social media. On that front of social media, the same study found that 74% of B2B buyers use LinkedIn for business reasons. That's also, on top of that, we've got 42% currently using Twitter for business reasons. So social media really is driving a completely different way to engage and share information about our products. Secondly, we are all operating in a crowded and noisy marketplace. There's more competitive options available. As well as the fact that there's more of them, there's more people professing to do much the same thing as our businesses do. So I often like to play a game where I walk around a conference or a sales exhibition, and I imagine that if you remove the logo from all of your competitors' stands in the room, and then you just walk around and read the buzzwords and the rhetoric on everyone's stands and try and distinguish one from the other, I can tell you right now, it's almost impossible. It's very difficult to distinguish how we really differ from our competitors. And you have to put yourself in our customers' shoes. Our customers are going to be facing those same messages. The same rhetoric is going to be repeating itself over and over again. And it becomes more difficult to really identify what our unique differentiators are. Thirdly, more and more people are getting involved in the buying process within the purchasing organization. So this might be a sign of the economic environment and the tightening of the financial belt, but there are more lines of reporting than ever before. So I remember not even 3 years ago, I was working in the NHS here in the UK, and my key stakeholder, who had previous to that year always made the decision about a sign-off for a particular deal or a renewal, actually, for a license they had with us. This particular year, when I called him up, he said, unfortunately, Dave, I can't make this decision. I've got 2 or 3 other people that I need to get a green light from before we can move forwards. So there are more and more people involved in that same decision that person made last year. And furthermore, multiple buying influences makes our job as salespeople much more difficult, because we've got more stakeholders, more business issues to understand, and more perceptions about value. So we have to really get inside the business issues for multiple buyers and try and understand that fully. Finally, in terms of the background, we as salespeople are getting involved a lot later in the sales cycle. So the fact that we are getting involved so much later is a result of more information available, a competitive marketplace, and more deals going out to tender or RFP. So it's kind of a perfect storm. In fact, a recent article from the CEB says that we are now involved more than halfway through the buying process. So customers already know an awful lot about our products and services. Often they know exactly what our solution can do. They know how much it costs before we even walk in the door. And that puts us on the back foot slightly. We need to change the way that we sell. We've got these super buyers. They're influenced. They're hard to get in front of. They're price sensitive. We need to counter this by being really good at figuring out where they are in the buying process and potentially who's influenced them. We need to adapt very quickly our sales approach and the questions that we ask. To do that is going to be a whole lot easier if we understand how customers buy. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at the value buying process. So a lot of people on the call have already been on a value selling course, and this will be very familiar. But for those that haven't, or a bit of a refresher, here's how we at Value Selling understand the buying process. So this is a business-centric sales conversation. Through the use of the value selling framework, we can align our selling efforts with the way that people buy. So to start with, we've got the business issue. A business issue is the number one challenge faced by that buyer, often expressed in financial terms. That then is linked to a set of problems. Problems are what is getting in the way of the buyer achieving his or her business issue. Our job is to link those problems to a solution. And this is the buyer's view. This is key. It's the buyer's view of the solution or our solution's capabilities. Once we connect problem to solution and connect solution back to the original business issue, we call that a vision match. Once we've established the vision match, we can move on to talking about value, which can be the business value or personal. You can talk about power. So have you understood how the decision is going to get made and who's going to sign off? You can also look at the plan. And this needs to be mutually agreed, yourself and the customer. It needs to be in writing, and it needs to be time-stamped. So this is the ingredients that goes into a sale. If any of these factors are missing or weak, it's going to add risk to the deal. So now we know how people are going to buy, and now we know about how the environment's changed. Let's start to look at price. Price is going to come up. I can almost guarantee you, more often than not, there will come a point, and that awkward moment in a meeting, whenever it is, when someone says, how much does it cost? But when? We know that's going to happen, so let's be proactive about that. When should we, as the salespeople, bring up that price discussion? So what I'm going to ask you to do here again is go ahead and write your answers about when we should have this pricing conversation. There's no right or wrong answer. I just want to get opinions from the floor about typically when do you have this buying process, so this pricing discussion. So it might be after the deliverables. It might be before terms and conditions. It might be a proposal stage. Often people say it's right at the beginning. To qualify, is this prospect serious or not? So I'm going to go ahead and ask you to take 10 seconds to just write down your thoughts about when we should have this price discussion. Go ahead and do that now. Thanks very much. I can see your answers coming in here. So I can see a lot of people saying that it should be before terms and conditions. I can see a lot of people saying that it should be at proposal stage. That seems to be the main answer, is that it should be at proposal stage. And those are all great answers. And as I said, I don't think there's an absolute right or wrong answer. But at value selling, what we advocate is that good things come to those who wait. So coming from the UK, it was difficult not to put in a picture of Guinness. I thought I'd do it closer to the beginning. So we advocate that price should be really quite close to the end. It should come after deliverables, after terms and conditions, because the key is, first, we have to understand the specifics behind what it is that we're going to be delivering. We need to understand when, where, how many, all of these things are going to dictate, how much the price should be. So terms and conditions play a key part in determining the price. For example, let's say your customer turned around and says, look, I need 24-hour service turnaround on every single one of my issues. Now that may be achievable, but there's going to be a resource implication if your typical SLA for turning around service issues is 48 hours or a week. So you need to understand how that's going to impact on your bottom line and subsequently how that's associated to the cost. If you think about it, it's difficult to discuss price before you come to a real solid agreement on what your prospect is going to get and under what terms and conditions. Be sure not to give out the price until you have a solid agreement on what the prospect needs and wants. So that's the first thing. Wait for as long as possible before having the pricing discussion. Secondly, price is always going to be easier. The discussion is always going to flow more readily if you are differentiated, or at least if some of your propositions and your capabilities are unique in the marketplace. So here's some eggs. You can see there's one that's slightly different, and we spend a lot of time with value selling talking to our clients about what makes them truly unique. It's not enough for you to tell the prospect why you're unique. You need to differentiate yourself from any other competitor's solution, and the client needs to understand the difference and be willing to pay incrementally for your enhanced capabilities. And that's really key. The product is in the mind of the buyer, and if we're going to persuade anyone, let's persuade them rather than just preaching. If and when the price objection comes up, and it may, always be ready to ask, compared to what? The answer to this question will give you an incredible amount of insight into the state of mind of the buyer, what competitive alternatives are being evaluated, and probably give you a better benchmark to make an informed decision about whether you should walk away or whether you can compromise on price. So that really is key, to be sort of forearmed on the pricing discussion and to be differentiated from some of your competitors. The way that we do that, the tool that we use to differentiate yourself in the market, we call it the value prompter. So again, if you've spent time with value selling, this will be very familiar to you, but I like to think about it. I like to think about the value prompter in terms of hats and hooks. So hats and hooks. Bear with me while I explain. So problems are the hooks. The more hooks that we identify, the more hats, or our solution, the more of our unique capabilities we can put a hat on each one of those problem hooks. So it really is important to stay for as long as possible in the problem box. If we spend time really getting to understand not just one problem, but numerous, I think as salespeople, we almost get overexcited. I think we see a problem, we uncover that problem, and the temptation is to go straight through to solution, straight through to value, and think, oh, I've got a hat that's going to fit that hook perfectly. But what you need to do is you need to be really disciplined about staying in the problem box, because the more hooks that we identify, the more unique capabilities that we can match up with our solution, and the more value in the long term we're going to be able to uncover. Because otherwise, the danger is that if we don't do that effectively, then if we haven't covered enough problems, then when we get to the value box, the discussion can only be about price. And what's the rule about price? It's always too expensive. If it's the only thing on a piece of paper with nothing to compare it against, you're going to be perceived to be higher than the product is worth. So we really need to spend time building up the problem, the solution, linking those back to the business issue, and associating it with value. So here's a little exercise I'd like you to do. I'm not going to ask you to write those in the chat box. After the call, when we come off, what I'd like you to do is think about your own unique capabilities within your business. I want you to write them down. Then start to think about some of the questions that you could reverse engineer, open probing questions that would enable you, or open problem questions, whatever it is, that would enable you to ask at your next sales visit to uncover those unique capabilities. Let me give you an example. So if you feel that your unique capability in the market is system reliability and great service support, that is fantastic. But you need to ask a question that, I guess, articulates the value in the mind of the buyer of that key USP. So the question might be something like, have you ever experienced downtime with your systems in the past 12 months? If the answer to that question is yes, you know you've got a hook, and you know that you've also got a hat that could go on that problem hook. Once you get into the value box, you can extrapolate on that further, and you can ask questions about what is the financial impact of that downtime, and you can start to really get inside the value so that when it comes to the pricing discussion, you've got a lot more value in the value box, and it seems like a more fair comparison. We've spoken a little bit about value, and what I'd like to do, because it's really, really important in this topic, is I'd like to ask you to think about value a little bit more. So here's some basic rules, some basic things to remember about value. At value selling, we advocate that you, as a salesperson, you don't create value. You're not able to create value, but what you can do is uncover it, and you can connect your solutions to the value. Secondly, value is customer specific. So with every single customer interaction that you have, you're going to need to tailor the specific customer value to that individual conversation. Thirdly, there are two types of value, business value and personal value. Depending on the situation, personal value can often be more important. So business value might be things like ROI or higher efficiencies, lower cost, whatever it is. Personal value might be getting to go home at 3 o'clock on a Friday and take your daughter to swimming lessons, or a promotion at work. Those personal value, those personal drivers can be incredibly strong in driving the sale forwards and in negating some of the objections that come about through pricing. The next point is around energy. So I feel, and at value selling we talk about value being the energy that fuels the change. So some other methodologies call it a burning platform or a compelling reason. What it all comes down to is the fundamental principle that people need a reason to change. Change is scary. Inertia is a common emotion because it is a worry to change anything that's working. The status quo is often very attractive. So we need to be really good at having that value conversation and providing the energy that's going to fuel the change. Finally, around value. Value always has to accrue to the business issue. So it's no good uncovering a bunch of value that you think is important if it doesn't link back to the customer's individual business issue that you've identified. It's not going to be as powerful. So that's kind of some key thoughts about value. Value can be expressed in a number of ways. So it might be in financial terms, it might be profits, employee turnover, customer satisfaction, market share, and so on. But how is it different from price? Let's talk about that. Without value, the only thing to talk about when it comes to price is how much it costs, is the dollars and cents of how much your solution is. And unless you are the cheapest supplier in the marketplace, your solution on a blank sheet of paper, if it's just about the price, is going to be too high. So remember, there's a significant difference between price and between price and cost and value. So here's a simple comparison for you. A low-end entry-level car will get you from A to B, granted. But a lot of people will be prepared to pay a little bit of extra money to drive that same journey in a luxury vehicle. It might be little things. It might be air conditioning or the brand or the badge on a car. I recently purchased a car about a month ago, and the kicker for me, the thing that swayed my decision, was Bluetooth, because I spent a lot of time in the car and I wanted to make calls and be productive, and Bluetooth connectivity was key. So that was the really valuable thing about the car. I mean, it was probably overpriced, but it didn't matter to me because it had Bluetooth and I placed value on that Bluetooth. Business-to-business selling is not that different. If you can help your prospect to see value and to understand the worth of your product, what that means is that price is going to be less of an issue when it comes to that discussion. Right. So now that we know when to talk about price and how to have this value conversation, let's discuss what actually happens when the pricing discussion comes up. And let's discuss how to negotiate. Negotiating is key, and I think we can spend a lot of time on it. I think not too long ago we did a whole webinar on this. I think you could spend a whole day on this. It really is a key part of pricing, and there's three key things that we're looking to achieve. Firstly, we're looking to achieve a win-win outcome. So that means the customer doesn't win, you don't win in your own right, but together you both reach an outcome which makes you both happy. If not, if the customer wins and you lose, or if you lose and the customer wins, what ends up happening over time is it sours the relationship, and you won't be able to do sustainable business with that client, whoever perceives to have won in the first instance. It needs to be reached in an efficient manner, so it doesn't make sense if it drags out over a long period of time. What's going to happen is it's going to sour the relationship as well. If you continue to let this drag on, it needs to be timely, and the effort needs to happen in a short period of time. Finally, it needs to preserve the relationship. That's, after the negotiation is said and done, we will want a really powerful and fruitful relationship with our customers. So we need to, every single negotiation that we go into, we need to be thinking about the end in mind. We need to be thinking about how we're going to make sure that this is a win-win for both parties and the relationship is preserved. There's certain terms to negotiation, and there's certain dimensions that you can throw into the mix. What I'd like you to do on your chat panel again is go ahead and write down some of the things that you think can sway a decision. So it might be things like deliverables. I'm not going to give you too many answers. I want you to think about some for yourself. What are the things that you can use in a pricing discussion when you're negotiating? I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to think about that. I can see some answers coming in here. So I can see people are talking about deliverables. Obviously, I mentioned that one. People have mentioned terms and conditions. That's fantastic. People talking about value. That's exactly right. So I'm going to put you out of your misery. I'm going to close that one down. The three, and again, this is not exhaustive, but just to give you a flavor, the three main ones that we usually talk about are deliverables, T's and C's, and price. And of course, the fourth dimension, the pivotal one that we've already spent some time on, is value. So at value selling, we often talk about the fact that negotiations are multi-dimensional processes. Often it seems that, and often when we're talking to procurement, it feels like there's only a single dimension to the pricing discussion, and that's around the price. Our belief as sales professionals and as at value selling is that we need to expand the conversation, move away from the single focus around price and look at more at other dimensions within the negotiation. A common misconception is that negotiations happen at the end of the buying cycle. They absolutely can, and they often do happen at the end. But by the time the deals reach purchasing, you kind of can only negotiate on price, forcing us to scramble to protect our pricing and our margins in the deal. In reality, we have been negotiating throughout the whole sales cycle. Whether we realize it or not, every single time we give something away, so it might be a pricing concession, a demo, a free trial, whatever it is, every time we give something away, we're effectively leaking value from the negotiation. As sales professionals, we need to be fantastic at plugging these value leaks. We need to embrace that this exchanging of value. So give and take. That's what a negotiation is all about. By doing this, we can avoid unnecessary discounting and use all of the levers available to us in the negotiation. So let's explore for a minute some of the negotiation tactics. These are the dimensions. These are the tools and the things that we can play with. But let's talk about how we can play with them. So we talk about three key negotiating strategies. The first one, and to be honest, the primary one, the one we should be looking to action most often, is a trade-off. So that's exchanging one item for another of equal value, which the buyer wants in the same category. So it might be pricing, terms and conditions, whatever it is. It's kind of giving and taking. It's kind of that idea of I'm gonna get what I want, and I'm gonna give you some of what you want. So before we can do that, we need to know what is important to the customer. We need to know what buttons we can push that's going to move this deal forwards. Then we have to figure out from our own perspective what we can offer. So some of that is going to be dictated around our sales process within our organizations. Some of it will come from our manager or company policies, but we need to be really clear on what those rules of engagement are and what we can give and take from our side. You should trade off those things that meet the customer's needs, that differ from your initial proposal. You should get something, this is absolutely pivotal, you should get something equal in value in return for every single thing that you give up. It needs to be balanced. That's the key. Once you start swaying power, it's going to end up in a win-lose situation or even a lose-lose. So some examples of trade-offs might be more favorable payment terms for a reduced price. It might be additional terms such as a reference account for a better payment term. It might be a reduction in the deliverables for a reduction in price. You might say, I can give you it for 25% less of the price, but I'm going to need to take out some of these value-add services. It might be around terms and conditions or using that customer as a case study or a press release. So we really do have a lot of things outside of just the price that we can use to play with. If, for whatever reason, trade-off isn't available to us, there's something else we can do. And we call that embellishment. So it's enhancing items in categories other than the one where there is a difference. So if trade-offs can't be used, we love to talk about things that are low cost to us but high value to the company that we're working with. So they won't impact our company in a big way, but they allow us to sweeten the deal. So your customer is looking for something additional. It might be, I used to work in a business where we did a lot of data sales. We had some value-add services which were online based. They were pretty inexpensive for us to administer. But more often than not, we would give them away in exchange for something important, whether it be terms and conditions or whether it be, will you meet me halfway on the price if I can throw in X, Y, Z. It really is a really nice tool that you can use to try and get the negotiation going forwards and get the conversation moving. Remember that embellishment is exactly that. It's adding elements to the negotiation. Don't subtract or take things away. Don't give away free trials. An embellishment is about adding something that wasn't in the initial proposal. And the third and final strategy is compromise. So I'm sure you're familiar with this. I'm sure you probably come across this every day in your own lives. A compromise is used when basically both parties give a little and find a middle ground. So as long as there is a middle ground and as long as it doesn't have too much of a massive impact on either party, the goal is again to look for that win-win. It's not at our customer's expense. It's not at our expense. It's a win for both parties. That's going to enable us to build long-lasting, continuous relationships with our clients. So I remember a situation not too long ago, probably 18 months ago. I was working with a big pharmaceutical company here in the UK. I also represented a FTSE 100 company, and both of our commercial teams were very set in their ways. They both wanted to win the discussion. The actual discussion was around payment terms. So the pharmaceutical company that I was working with, their payment terms were 90 days. Our payment terms and our standard terms were 30 days. So there was a 60-day disconnect between where we were coming from. What I did and what kind of resonated with me afterwards was I went, because we'd been playing this contract tennis, I'm sure you're familiar with, 6 weeks of bouncing back and forth around the same terms and conditions. So what I did is I phoned my sponsor at the pharmaceutical company and I just said, look mate, how can we push this forwards? What would you have to hear, or what would your commercial team have to hear in order for us to find a middle ground here? And he said, look Dave, I think if you said that you were going to go with 60 days right in the middle and be firm about that, I think they would have to agree and we could move this forwards. And we did. Within 3 working days, the whole thing was resolved and we moved forwards just by having that off-the-record conversation and by splitting the difference. So at this point, if it's all right with you, I'd like to get your opinion on how these tools and tactics might be useful to you. What I would like you to do is take part in a short interactive poll. So I'm going to ask my colleague Chris out in California to see if she can drive this for us. And what I'd like you to do is answer this question. Of the 3 trade-offs that we've spoken about, so of the 3 tactics, you've got trade-offs, you've got embellishments, and you've got compromise. Which one of those three, or it might be all of the above, is going to be most important to you? I currently can't see the poll being launched to you, but I'm wondering if potentially you can. So I'm going to let this run through for a few seconds and see if we can get some answers. So again, the options are trade-off, which is exchanging one thing for another, embellishment, which is how can we sweeten the deal, and compromise, which is around meeting halfway. And the fourth option, option D, might be all of the above. If you have used these already, or if you think that some of these might be valuable, we'd love to hear your opinion. Now, because I can't see the poll, what I'm going to suggest is we'll close it down in about 10 or 15 seconds. I can't see the responses right now, but if we can share those with you afterwards, that's a piece of insight which might be useful for you. So whatever you thought, keep that in your head, and we'll see what everyone else thought as well shortly after the webinar. The next thing we're going to do, I'm going to give you something to take away with you. We at Value Selling, we use something called the negotiation prompter. So it's a great tool that enables you to map out where you are and where your customer is in the negotiation process. It requires a little bit of pre-work, so a little bit of homework beforehand, but once you've done it, your negotiation will go much, much smoother. So firstly, before you get started on this negotiation prompter, you need to know your limits of negotiating authority. So you need to know how far you can move and how much authority you have to make decisions. You need to define what constitutes a win for all parties. What does the ideal situation look like, both for yourself and for your prospect? You need to identify and leverage those points and those of your customers. And finally, you need to map it out. Don't just do this in your head. You need to write it all down. So this is what it looks like. I've just filled in some example values in here. Obviously, you can put in a lot more detail. But these are our three different tactics. We've got trade-offs, embellishments, and compromises. These are the categories that we might be talking about. So these are the dimensions. This could be much longer. You could have this, it could be 5 different categories. And then you've got the prospect's ideal outcome, your ideal outcome, and your strategy for finding a way forwards. So working this example through, if hypothetically your prospect's ideal outcome for terms and conditions was 45 days and you wanted payment on receipt, that's a bit of a disconnect and we need to find a strategy. But if we know that they actually want 30 licenses and we're pushing for 35 licenses, that might provide a perfect trade-off. If we can say to our customer in a candid and open way, I know you want 45-day payment terms, and that might be something we can agree on, but I'm going to need you to meet me in the middle with regard to deliverables. I'm going to need you to go ahead and take 35 licenses. And with that give and take, that can push the deal forwards and be the difference between winning or a no-go decision. Price is another one, and again, price is what we're all here today to talk about. It's about finding that compromise. But if you have done your homework, if you have that insight into what the customer thinks it should be and where you think, what your rate card is, you can find that middle ground. And if you've already made that trade-off in the terms and conditions and deliverable boxes, potentially when it comes to the price, you can meet in the middle and find that that compromise by using that strategy. So I think I see an example sometimes. I might see a prospect's ideal situation might be terms and conditions, and that by trading off, by giving them or an embellishment or a trade-off on terms and conditions, that enables me to be more open, more honest, and for the pricing discussion to be that much more easy. So it means you can prepare with solutions, compromises to get the outcome that you're both looking for. What I'll do, it's not a complex piece of kit, but I can make this available in a PDF format or whatever it is. If you want to contact me straight after the webinar, I'll give you a copy of this. And I'd like you to prepare for your next negotiation. I'd like you to do that homework so that when you go in, forewarned is forearmed. I'm going to close down the negotiation topic just by giving you some kind of takeaways. So key things to remember when you're in your next negotiation. The first one is stay cool. You need to remain impartial. Don't just jump out and argue. Never ever argue. It's all about keeping cool and suggesting a return or a counter argument. The second one is you need to clarify. Ask loads and loads of questions. It can actually help you with a couple of things. Firstly, the person who asks the questions determines the content and the direction of the whole discussion. Secondly, you need to be really clear and really listening, actively listening to what the customer says, because their ideal situation, whether it's deliverables, terms, price, whatever it is, they're going to put those out on the table, and that means that you have a much better idea of how to reach a compromise. So ask great questions, clarify, and respond. Thirdly, you need to focus on the issue, not the style. Distinguishing between customer and their position on a certain issue. I'm sure, like me, you've heard of hair-raising stories about pretty savvy negotiators that believe that their style of being very difficult, demanding, or rude is going to lead to success. If that is not your natural style, I would caution you against parroting or mirroring that, because it might risk the relationship. It might damage the ongoing relationship. So what I'd urge you to do is to stay focused and to be yourself. Fourthly, I want you to think about reacting is always the last port of call. You should always respond, and again, this comes back to staying calm and cool. First respond and never ever react. Finally, you need to know when to walk away. And I think this is really difficult. For a lot of salespeople, it's a very difficult decision to make to say, I can no longer move forwards with this deal because I can't see a way that we can find a win-win. So you need to be candid and honest with yourself if that situation comes about. So we're coming to the end, but I've got a few more things to share with you about price. I'll speak for about 5 or 6 more minutes, and then we'll hand the floor over to some questions, and we'll take it from there. So firstly, be sure that price is the real issue. So that might sound intuitive, but the expression, you're too expensive, that's the easiest way for your prospect to dismiss you. And sometimes it can just be a brush off, or it can be masking a bigger or different issue within the business. So make sure you understand whether it's price or whether it's something else, whether it's terms and conditions or the fact that we don't think that you're offering enough value. Really try and confirm and triangulate that idea that price is actually the reason that they're not going forwards. And secondly on this, even if you can confirm that price is the real issue, what is it about the price? What is it about the price that's causing you to not be able to go forwards? It might just be as simple as a CapEx, OpEx situation. It might be something about phasing or invoice schedules. If you can talk about price and if you can try and understand what it is, again, ask lots of confirming questions just to make sure I've understood you correctly. Your current issue is price, but what is it about the price? And by asking those questions, you can often get a very different answer from the first response. The penultimate point is be prepared. So the price objection is feared, but it's inevitable. Yet most salespeople aren't prepared to address and manage the conversation. If you offer a higher priced alternative, be prepared to defend your price and the value that it could bring to your prospect in their terms. If you've managed the sales process effectively and you've uncovered value, this is a piece of cake. But if price is the first topic discussed, then it's going to be a very difficult situation and probably the conversation's not going to go your way. So be prepared, do your homework, and if you have the value conversation, it shouldn't be too difficult at all. Finally, be like this guy. Believe in and have confidence in yourself and in your own products. If you don't believe in your products, if you don't believe that they're valuable, neither will your prospect. Be honest. Look at your own bias, look at your own understanding of your products and services, and be sure that you understand how those are going to bring value to the businesses and individuals that you're looking to work with. Convince yourself before you try and convince anyone else. I've never heard of Zip Ultra, but this guy sure believes in it. So you need to take a leaf out of his book. Right. So the call to action. What are we all going to do tomorrow morning when we get into the office? Step 1. I want you to try and think about value. I want you to try and think about creating questions that are going to help you uncover that value in your sales process. I think that's pivotal, and if you need to use the value prompter, that's a fantastic tool. But if whatever works for you, make sure that you're asking the right questions to uncover the value. Secondly, wait. Remember the Guinness advert. Good things come to those. And I think if you can wait for as long as possible, if you can delay that pricing discussion, it's going to be much easier when it does come about. And finally, get your hands dirty. Use the negotiation prompter, prepare some specific strategies, and go into your next interaction with that insight. And I think you'll find that it's a more smooth transaction. Let me know how you get on. But I would suggest that if you can use that tool and do your homework beforehand, you'll be in a really good place at negotiation time. So my closing thoughts on this are kind of just to reiterate, it's all about what you know. The more value that you can uncover during the sales process, the more you can leverage at the pricing discussion, and prepare. I think that is really my 2 takeaways. Your goal, remember this, your goal is not to win the deal, but your goal is to win the deal once, but is not to win the deal once, but to win the customer for life and delight them. That is key. I'm gonna hand over to questions in a minute. I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to be able to see all of your questions, but before I do, at the end of today's webinar, as I mentioned, it is going to be available. It is going to be available from the Value Selling website, so I urge you to look under resources on our website, under webinars. I'd like you, if it's easier for you, if you'd prefer, this will also be available on YouTube. And please come and talk to us on social media. We're on LinkedIn at Value Selling. We're on Twitter at Value with no E, so VALU Selling. And we're at Facebook on Value Selling Associates. So come and join us. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me directly. I'll put my email address up at the end. And visit the store. If you're already a Value Selling customer and you use our methodology, all the tools that you need to embed it into your organization are there. So your notepads, your books, whatever it is, come and have a look at the Value Selling store and get whatever it is you need. I'd like to also extend an invitation to you, so save the date. We'll be here about the same time in a month's time, 10 o'clock PDT. Come and join us when we'll be talking about team sales team dynamics, making the most of team selling. So that's gonna be a really insightful session, and I'll certainly be dialing in myself. So I'd like to, if I may, open the floor to some questions, if I can see them. Let's have a quick look. I'm not seeing any questions coming through just yet, but I'll give it a few more minutes and let you answer. I did have one just before we came online about using price and the pricing discussion, which was around, does this process change for shorter sales cycles? So would I be able to apply this to B2C applications? And I would say that this methodology, the reason why this methodology is great is because it's all about the way that people buy. So value, asking good, open, probing, and confirming questions. The business issue, okay, so you might not call it a business issue in a B2C environment, but what is that person really trying to achieve? Those things are all going to be the same, and you should follow exactly the same steps in order to achieve this, whether it be in a retail environment, telesales. We've been working a lot lately with sort of telesales teams, and okay, the sales cycles might be shorter, but the same rules of play apply. So I'd urge you to use the same techniques. I'm really sorry that I can't see any other questions coming up, but what I'm going to do is I'll take some time at the end of the session to answer those directly. I'll sit on the emails for a few minutes and answer any questions that you have. If you want to go ahead and email me directly. So again, my name is David Nisbet. I'm a value selling partner here in the UK. That's my email address. By all means, drop me a note or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll be sure to answer any questions that you may have. So we've pretty much reached the end of our time. We're about 9 minutes ahead of schedule, so you guys can have 9 minutes back. And thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you here this time next month. Thanks again.